reparar las víctimas y restituirle la tierra a los campesinos que han sido desplazados por la violencia, una ley que ya nos ha permitido reparar hasta en estos primeros 2 años que lleva la ley 380.000 víctimas. Nosotros tenemos 6 millones de víctimas, de desplazados. Y entonces quisimos poner las víctimas en el centro de la solución y sus derechos, el derecho a la verdad, que la verdad libera, el derecho a la reparación, que es lo que estamos haciendo a un costo fiscal muy alto, y el derecho a la justicia. Y a mí me ha sorprendido lo que ustedes están diciendo, lo vivo todos los días, hablando con las víctimas, me ha sorprendido esa capacidad de las víctimas de perdonar, de querer reconciliar. Yo podría mencionarles 20, 30 anécdotas como la que usted mencionaba, presidente Clinton, de gente que me dice, no, yo perdí mis hijos, yo perdí mi padre, yo perdí todo, pero siga por la paz, porque no quiero que le suceda al resto de los colombianos lo que me sucedió a mí. Eso es uno de los grandes estímulos que uno tiene en un proceso de esta naturaleza. Nosotros estamos haciendo un gran esfuerzo en colocar a las víctimas, inclusive vamos a llevar a las víctimas a La Habana, porque por primera vez la guerrilla reconoció a las víctimas. Muchas veces la víctima lo único que quiere es que lo reconozcan como víctima. La guerrilla no había querido hasta hace 3 semanas. Ellos decían, no, si nosotros somos las víctimas del Estado, nosotros no reconocemos ser victimarios. Por primera vez reconocieron y se pusieron de acuerdo con el gobierno en 10 principios básicos para el tratamiento de las víctimas. Para mí, ese fue el tipping point, el punto de inflexión en las negociaciones, cuando la guerrilla finalmente dijo, reconocemos víctimas, porque de ahí se desprende el perdón, de ahí se desprende la verdad, que es lo que nos va a poder llevar a una reconciliación final. Y con estas reflexiones quería hacerles la siguiente pregunta. Presidente Clinton, usted mencionaba algo que para nosotros es claro. El proceso en que estamos le pone fin al conflicto y ahí comienza la construcción de la paz. Ahí es donde entra la tercera vía a jugar con más fuerza, o el modelo económico, o las políticas públicas apropiadas. Y esto quiero atarlo a algo que está sucediendo este año. Usted está organizando un gran evento a final de año para conmemorar los 20 años de la Cumbre de las Américas. ¿Para dónde va el continente? ¿Cómo creen ustedes que se puede desde ya preparar mejor ese post-conflicto? Es decir, ese proceso de construcción de la paz y el papel de la comunidad internacional en ese proceso, que para nosotros nos parece fundamental, parece importantísimo. ¿Qué creen ustedes que nosotros debemos hacer desde ya, pensando en ese post-conflicto?
In terms of the international community, Tony can probably give you a better answer than I can. But I think what you have done and what you're trying to do to give compensation for past wrongs is profoundly important and probably more necessary here than any other place I've worked, because so much of this involved throwing people off their land. But I think the most important thing you can do is to take the affected populations and other people who are marginalized in Colombia and bring them into the circle of opportunity. And we have to do this all over the Americas. Inclusive capitalism. Yesterday, I saw a couple of models of what we're all doing here together that are really important. We visited a farm where we're helping poor farmers on limited amounts of land dramatically improve their productivity and their incomes. And I went to the first graduation of the training program that was initially started by my friend Frank Juster and I in our enterprise partnership. We had the Colombian government, the Canadian government, the American government involved, several of your prominent businesses, a lot of individuals. We were all doing this together. And seeing those children, many of whom came from marginalized, displaced populations, at the first graduation ceremony, in their little caps and gowns, singing the national anthem. I wish you could have heard it. Every Colombian would have cried. These kids were belting out the national anthem like it was the only song they'd ever sing. Why? Because they think tomorrow can be better than today. That's the only other advice I have to you. You have to give people something to look forward to. One of the things that keeps people stewing in the resentment of the past is the sense that every tomorrow will be like yesterday. And poverty is a terrible problem, but stagnation kills the soul. People can overcome poverty if they know they have a way to do it. But so I think these things you were doing, and Colombia is a remarkable example of the power of third way cooperation, business, government, the NGOs, everybody working together to actually lift people and reduce income and social inequality. I think that should be a very central part of this, and not just for Colombia, but for all the Americas. You know, in the first decade of this, they're having a little trouble now, but the first decade of this new century, Brazil and Mexico, which have traditionally been the most unequal countries in the Americas, unlike the United States, actually had a decline in income inequality. And President Cardozo is nodding his head. It started with his Bolsa Escola program and then was expanded to the Bolsa Familia program under President Lula, and a lot of other things happened. Mexico built 140 universities and graduated 113,000 engineers last year, only 7,000 fewer than the United States. And we're 3 times as big. I think that's important. I think the third way economic and social policy is critical to the next steps in the peace process. Because even if you get a deal, you don't want people stuck where they are. The deal has to open up possibility and movement. So I think that all of you here who are Colombian, you should be very proud that these initiatives are going on, and all of you should take part in them. We should try to keep people with a sense of possibility. Stagnation kills the success of peace processes, and it kills human dreams. And so people have the feeling here that everything's on the move. And anything you can do to keep that going, to create the spirit that I saw in those young children from displaced populations singing the national anthem. They were proud to be Colombians yesterday. And they believed that they were going to be able to have the dignity of a job and build a family and go forward. The mayor was there. I see him nodding his head. This is a big, big deal. And it makes all these other things so much easier.
Tony, and if you might add one additional answer to a question I'm just about to ask you. What you wrote about the third way in 1999, or when you, New Labor, you were sort of constructing the group. 15 years later, what will you change on the basic principles, if any? Is there any new aspect that you would add something that you would erase, something that you would change. But that's an additional question to the question about the post-conflict and the international community, which you're an expert on.
Post-conflict, what is definitely supremely important is to follow up the peace with the infrastructure, the opportunity, the building of the business, the education, the healthcare. I mean, people have got to feel that the peace has also made their lives better. I mean, peace is the opening of the gate, okay? But it doesn't, you then got to go and build, right? And so I think the follow-up is really, really important. And in Northern Ireland, it was of fundamental importance that we got the economy going, we had investment going, and in this, the international community played a great part in Northern Ireland and can do here. I mean, this, by the way, this will be, if you achieve it, this is one of the biggest things that will have happened globally. Okay, I mean, this was a huge endemic conflict that people thought was possibly never going to be resolved. So, this is a huge thing that will inspire and motivate people in the international community. And I think it's important to access as much of that help and investment as you possibly can. There'll be people willing to help, make sure that they do, and all of us will do whatever we can to help in that. But definitely for people, they need to see their lives changing as a result of peace, and that means the life around them. So I think in respect of the third way, well, I would, the whole essence of the third way is you're always renovating and renewing policy. So for example, today, if I was looking at education or healthcare, technology alone would mean that my policy was completely different in 2014 than it would be in 1999. But I like to think that the capacity to innovate is kind of built into the concept of the third way. I think the public-private partnership side between business and government, trade unions is still absolutely correct. And I personally believe there's a great role for the voluntary sector as well. So I see it as public-private voluntary sector, and I think that principle is still absolutely valid. But I always say to people, for me, looking at Europe today, never mind Latin America, third way politics is still the right response. Because in the end, if you're to make big change, if you're asking a country to reform, and in a world of change, countries have got to be permanently changing. Businesses are changing, communities are changing, government itself has got to be prepared to change. But if you're asking people to accept change, you have to do so on the basis of an essential concept of justice for all, right? As you say, prosperity for all. Right? If people think the change just benefits a small number of people at the top, it's never going to work. So that third way concept is about constant innovation and new policies for new times. It's about the partnership between public, private and voluntary sector. And it's about making sure that the purpose of our change and reform, the purpose of that economic growth, is to bring prosperity not to the few but to the many. Those are the third way principles. I think they're as valid in 2014 as they were in 1999. And to be absolutely blunt about it, certainly I think in Latin America, but for sure in Europe now, if we had a little more third way, we'd be in a better place than we are. And I think Colombia and your policies are a great example of the third way in action, and keep it up.
They're already making signs that the time is up. Quiero nuevamente agradecerle al presidente Clinton, primer ministro Blair, este gesto que ustedes han tenido con Colombia, de venir hasta aquí en sus agendas tan congestionadas para hablarnos y darnos sus opiniones todas muy importantes y muy oportunas. De manera que muchas gracias. Yo aprovecho para darle la bienvenida a otro exmandatario, el presidente Gaviria, otro exmandatario muy exitoso, porque también en su gestión se desarrollaron muchas de las reformas que hoy estamos gozando, sus frutos estamos gozando aquí en Colombia. Entonces, vamos a dar entonces por terminada esta primera parte de la mañana, y agradeciéndole al presidente Clinton y al primer ministro Blair su permanente apoyo a Colombia, su permanente presencia aquí en nuestro país, y ustedes saben que son colombianos de corazón, y aquí serán siempre bienvenidos como colombianos de corazón. Muchas gracias.